My love affair with Porsche started 45 years ago when I was 10 years old, when my dad took me to the London Autosport Motor Show in 1977. That was where I saw that white Martini Turbo. Ironically, the LA Auto Show begins later on today, so this is sort of full circle for me also, almost 45 years later. So the significance of the UO10 is 10 Porsche cars that I've modified and built in a sport purpose sort of form. Most people when they think of Porsche probably will think of 911. What I'm showing here is front engine, mid-engine, rear engine, both air and water cooled. The first car you'll see when we get in there is a 924, next to it is a 914 and then a 993. But perhaps we should start here. When I think of Porsche, and I think when a lot of people think of Porsche, they think of this iconic silhouette. You all know what it is. It's the 930 Turbo. This happens to be a 1975 930 Turbo. That was the full production year, and the first year that the Turbo debuted, Porsche made 284 of them. This is one example of those 284. Finding a 75 Turbo here in America is a little bit rare because the US market didn't get the Turbo until 76. What you'll see inside is the first US Turbo ever sold that I've owned for about 10 years. I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail when we go in, but follow me in and welcome to the UO10 Retrospective Exhibition. So we're walking into what the Petersen calls the Legends Room in the Vault. This room opened during COVID about 18 months ago, and I'm the 5th exhibition to be here. There's been a lowrider exhibition, a roof exhibition, a Formula One exhibition, and an exhibition with the 962s. One of the things that I'm most proud about, other than having my own exhibition at the Petersen Museum, is all 10 cars were driven here. This doesn't seem like a big deal because we know Porsches were built to be driven. But most cars that are on display in most museums are not driven to the museum and placed in spot. They come on a trailer and get pushed in. But I wanted to do something a little bit different. So with the help of 9 of my friends, we drove all 10 of these cars here at night time and made a little short documentary film about it, which is actually going to be released next week. Because my whole goal was I have to drive the cars here. So we made a cool little film about it, which you'll see later on. Other than the cars, you're going to see a lot of collaborations that have happened over the 10 years since the film came out. For me, I haven't really changed, but the world opened up to me through this film. And I ended up being lucky enough to do some very cool collaborations with people such as Momo. I was the first non-professional race car driver in Momo's 50-year history to have their own signature steering wheel. This wheel came out in 2015. Also, you'll see on display a collaboration with Nike with 1552, and one of the coolest ones with Hot Wheels. So in 2016, Hot Wheels approached me and said, would you be interested in doing one car, which was a 356. 5-6 years later, I've done over 30 cars with Hot Wheels. Some of them are modeled on the cars that you'll see here. So if you go in chronological order, this is a 1980 924 Carrera GT. Porsche only made 406 of these. So if you have more time, you can read the QR code on the label here and scan it, and I will ramble on in great detail about each car that you see on display. This car I ended up actually buying in Australia and shipping it halfway around the world. And then other than adding the Minerva blue paint, the outlaw grey pinstripe and the outlaw wheels, that car is stock. Next to it is my punk rock DIY 914. This is not a 914.6, it's not a 914 2-liter, it's actually just a lowly 914 1.7-liter base model. But this car has an interesting story. The goal here was, I was doing an art car, and the goal was to imagine this car as being a race car that had gone through a lot of different liveries and paint jobs, and then it had been parked like a lot of old race cars become when they're obsolete, and then I resurrected the car. This car debuted at the SEMA show in 2019 with Mobil 1, and the interesting point to it is the graphic application that you see, these were originally Post-its, and then everything was old school rattle can and then hand distressed to give it the appearance of an old race car, which in fact it's not. But this car was at the SEMA show, and I was probably invested less than $500 on the cosmetic sort of appearance that you see here. So this car really showed that anything is possible if you just have an idea and a will and a way. Because for those that don't know, SEMA is a pretty big show where normally high-end shiny builds. This was perhaps the only time a 914 had ever been at the SEMA show, and it was there with Mobil 1. Next to it, you'll recognize this silhouette, the 993. This is the only car that I own that is not painted. I always prided myself on everything you'll see is paint, with the exception of this car. When I bought it from my buddy, it actually appeared in this somewhat Riviera blue wrap. And then my goal was to customize it, so I did the vinyl application, which was first applied just with hand paper tape to create this sort of pseudo camouflage United Colors of Benetton race car livery. This car was done in 2020. On the wall here is my favorite car, my 1971 911T, car number 277, that I originally bought at the promoter swap meet in 1999 for $7,500. It's photographed by the legendary photographer Larry Chan on the newly opened 6th Street Bridge. Now, a couple of interesting facts about this room. The 4 exhibitions that came before, no one had ever hung anything on the walls here. And the Petersen initially told me, no, you can't do that. And I said, why? And they said, well, it hasn't been done before. You'll see what happened now. We have a lot of stuff hanging on the walls. And my pride and joy is Larry Chan's photo of 277.
Why 277?
Completely random number. When I was doing a lot of track days and club racing, in 2002 I joined the Porsche Owners Club and took my somewhat aggressive street driving to the track. Did at least 50 track days a year at tracks such as Laguna Seca, Willow Springs, and various others. My birthday was 7/7/67. I just wanted a race number that had 7s in it. There is no significance to the number 277, really. It wasn't my birthday, it was just the only number available at that time that had some number 7s in it. Number 7 is my lucky number. Since then, though, this car has become relatable and significant because I think a lot of enthusiasts can relate to this car. It never actually raced anywhere like Daytona or Le Mans, but it was built as a sport purpose streetable track car that I've driven to places such as Laguna Seca, done some race weekends and driven it back home. The sum of its parts is nothing special. It's running old Wildmeister sway bars. It's still running, upgraded shocks. It didn't get upgraded to coilovers or anything like that. So it was modified over time. You know, it wasn't a high dollar build, and it was just modified to be a fun, streetable track car. And I think that is the relatability to a lot of people who are not Porsche people to 277. Everyone has built their favorite car, whether it was something they built with the dad, the granddad, whether it was a 240Z or a 911. The relatability is it was built from an enthusiast point of view with the goal of being a streetable track car. So that is 277.
How much did you pay for that one?
$7,500. And that was back in 1999. Perhaps my most performance-oriented build to date is my 1999 964. The goal here was not to modify, update, or backdate, but keep 964 DNA, the big bumpers, the big side rockers, but change everything about the car. There's elements of 356 in the car, there's elements of Roof Yellowbird, there's elements of Sport Classic. And for those with the keen eye, you'll notice the front hood has been channeled, the roof has been channeled, we've deleted the rain gutters, we've added individually steel stamped louvered fenders, we put the gas filler cap right in the fender, maintaining the original plumbing down to the tank. We've integrated R-turf signals on the rear, and I took an early 3-liter turbo tail and modified it. It's rolling on my own 17-inch outboard wheels, shot in sticky Pirelli rubber, Brembo club race brakes, and KW coilover suspension. But the heart and soul of it, like any Porsche, is in the rear, the 3.8 RS spec motor. So that is 1999 964. Next to it is the younger brother, the 1967 S. This is running a 2.5 twin plug motor that dynoed at 271 horsepower. This was the very first car that ever had the louvered fenders. You've got to remember, these louvered fenders came out a couple of years before the GT3 RS, which, as you know, is a carbon fiber insert. Now that only fender on the wall will show you the collaboration that I did with Rod Emery, where if you take a look at it, you'll see each one is individually drilled, slit, and then stamped upside down. This is not an insert, it's pressed directly into the fender. You'll see underneath the quality of cleanliness of this car. So, this will begin running into the collaboration with the Hot Wheels. If you see here, this is me in the 964 we just talked about over there. Normally when this exhibition's opening on this big screen behind me is 10 years worth of videos put into rotation. The newest car on display here is perhaps one of my all-time favorites, Gen 2 996 GT3. You guys probably know all about the GT3. Now I spoke earlier on about the first US turbo ever sold. And I'm not making this up, this has been documented by the archive at the museum. This is VIN number 15. 11, 12, 13, 14 in the US market were press demonstrator cars. You have to remember, still to this day, America is Porsche's largest global market. And the epicenter of the US market is right here in LA. You've got world-class driving roads, and the environment is generally pretty nice all year round. This car was originally delivered to Bob Smith Porsche in Hollywood, less than 5 miles from where we're standing. I am the 4th owner. My buddy Marty Materian had worked on it for the prior 2 owners. This car has never been registered outside of California, but it's been driven hard, but it's been well maintained. It's never been restored, and as you can see, it's in multiple different shades of paint. You've got to remember 10, 15, 20 years ago, this was just a turbo. What hadn't become the iconic status that it is today. This is also the only car in this collection that you're seeing today that, other than being on slightly wider wheels and having my own steering wheel, has not been modified. People always ask me, how do you determine what cars you modify? And I say quite simply, the car determines what gets modified. This is a numbers matching the first 930 turbo sold in perhaps Porsche's most important market, the USA. So this car is essentially stock, and that's the story with the 76 turbo. The wall behind, I spoke briefly about the significance of 277. Everything on this wall has been unsolicited artwork that people have sent me. I talked about how people related to 277 as a build, and this is just stuff that people have sent me in. October 12, October 15. 3 months later, I received a letter here on the wall from Porsche. This is the original letter. If you have time, you should read it. It talks about how they'd seen the film and they actually invited me to visit them. I went to visit Porsche for the first time in Stuttgart on 9/11/2013, almost a year after this film came out. I think the relevance and significance of the film still today, 10 years later, is people realize it's not a film necessarily about Porsche, it's a film about chasing your dreams and never giving up. That is my story. And I think what Porsche realized is I had something that couldn't be manufactured, put in a bottle and sold, and that's passion. I've been in love with Porsche for over 45 years. This is not a trend that I'm going to grow out of. I'm more passionate about the brand than I've ever been. And so for me, it's an honor to be able to showcase part of my collection in this world-class facility. The car right behind you is a very early 65 911. This is VIN number 300 through 10. You all know that the 64 911 came out in 1964 as a production year model. Porsche made 232 of those cars. This is car number 310. It was delivered to Brumo's Porsche in Jacksonville, Florida in early 1965. Perhaps one of the first dozen 911s that ever came into the USA. As you can see, it's continuing with that theme of a sport purpose build in a little bit more of what I would call a gentleman's livery with the early shield bucket seats. It's rolling on slightly later deep 6 15-inch Fuchs, and it's got this gentleman's racer style livery. The car next to it is the first year of the SC. That's a 1978 3-liter SC, another pseudo budget punk rock build. So the collection here starts with the 65 911 being the oldest, and the newest one being the 2004 GT3, separated by almost 40 years and quite a lot of horsepower. As you know, the original 911 was a 2-litre car at 130 horsepower. Today's Turbo S is probably about 750 horsepower. So Porsche has evolved, as you all know, from sports cars into other cars, but the passion and the drivability and the relatability is still there. We cover all the senses. So that's me rambling on about what you've seen. If you want to take a little time and look in the cases or take a photo next to myself and Willow, here is a short description of what the exhibition is all about.